Hi.
Yo,
Hey.
we definitely got
Yeah.
a light and dark thing going on here, huh?
Yeah. Well, I got a light that's like shining in my face. And it's one of these like bendy lights.
But also you've got a white room, bright top, and just like a genial demeanor that
Yeah.
I don't quite bring to the.
Yeah. I try to smile, Oz. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about you.
I'll
Yeah.
try it.
Okay. So for this one, two two things happened this week where I've been like super jazzed about stuff and I wanted to talk to you about it. One is I'm reading this book, which if I'm looking at my thing is kind of maybe it's hard to read, maybe you can read it, but it's called We Are Legion, We Are Bob. Have you heard of this book before?
I have not. No, it looks sci-fi.
It's sci-fi. Yeah. So this was suggested to me in a Hacker News comment. I know everyone thinks that Hacker News comments are this cesspool of negativity, but you can extract some
Oh,
good stuff. You
yeah, I
disagree.
disagree. We can talk
Okay.
about that
Okay.
another
No,
time.
no.
Tell
Tell
me about
me.
your book.
Oh, anyway. So this came out of um, I was like pushing my short stories last year, especially the ones that I thought would be tech related or tech inspired. And I wrote this short story about von Neumann probes because I had just read this biography of John von Neumann, which was amazing. And von Neumann probes seemed really cool. So I posted this, and several people came in to say, this reminded me a lot of this book. Or even better, it's like, you like von Neumann probes? This is the book about von Neumann probes. So
So what
without,
is a von Neumann probe?
so it's this great question. It is this self-replicating device that can be sent out into the universe and then harvest resources and self-replicate itself. And so it has enough intelligence to sort of seek out enough resources, and then it starts like building copies of itself, and it becomes this sort of intelligent swarm.
And
Um,
why is it a von Neumann probe?
I believe it's because, well, this is a good question. I should have looked this up. He might have conceptualized this concept, so it may have come from that. I don't think that it's like, oh, they have a von Neumann architecture in them. I mean, probably they do, but I think it's because he came up with this as a thought experiment. But I should
Okay,
look.
cool.
Yeah. So anyway, um, this book reminded me of The Martian. Have you seen that movie or
Love it. Yeah,
love it?
fantastic. Well, the book is just a fantastic
Okay.
book.
So why do you like that book?
Well, because it's one of the few, uh, at least positive recent sci-fi books. That's one. It's like,
Yeah.
why has sci-fi degenerated into cynicism, fear-mongering,
Mm,
like all of the negative possible aspects of our beliefs, fears about the future?
mhm.
That's what's been manifest in most sci-fi. And so when you find someone who's not like that, who's either positive or ambivalent, or like at least balanced about it,
Yeah.
like Greg Egan or someone. I feel like that's a kind of balance. Let's just pull on the thread and see what happens. And so I can get into that. So much of it is like, well, uh, all of our possible fears about the future should
Yeah.
be discussed and probed. Anyway, so I
Okay. So
like
that's
that.
one
And
side.
then
I think I'm hoping there's another side for another reason you like that book.
yeah, I mean the main reason really is that you have a protagonist who does back of the envelope calculations, like who's doing actual reasoning through things step by step, first principles. That's
Yes.
not omitted from the book. It is kind of omitted from the film, right? Like the film still captures a lot of the positive aspects, I feel like, of the process.
Yeah.
But the book, it's like, here's 3 pages of why I think that I'm going to be able to get to the point that I can grow my potatoes or whatever. Here's like the first principles reasoning of how much nitrogen I need and how I can generate it from this. And like it's there. It's all in the book. It's not
Yeah.
like abbreviated. It is actually how you might start to think through something like this, as thought through by the author. Okay, I just thought of a third reason why I like that book.
Okay.
Because I forget the author's name, sadly. Obviously,
Andy
the
Weir.
Andy
Andy
Weir. Yeah,
Weir.
yeah.
Yeah.
So he can code. I mean, look, no news. Everyone can code. I just saw a tweet the other day with like a list of the top 10 richest people or
Oh yeah.
something, which is not like obviously something I wouldn't look up or care about generally. And so when I saw it, I was like, wow, these are the richest people. They can almost all code. Well, exaggeration. Half of them have done a substantial amount of programming to
Yeah.
the point where if you gave them like an interview question, like a standard interview question, maybe with a little bit of prep to remind themselves, they'd be able to
Yeah.
do it. Isn't
Yeah.
that crazy that like
That's
half of
sick.
the richest people, it's not like inherited wealth, it's not like business executive, whatever. I mean, there are those people too, but like, anyway,
Yeah. No, no,
programs everywhere.
that's crazy. But
Andy Weir is one of them. I mean, not one of the, sadly, not one of the richest people in the world. He did
not
not
yet, at
make
least.
multiple billions of dollars. Yeah, sorry. Maybe next book. But with The Martian, he wrote programs, including one to accurately simulate. There's a scene where the protagonist has to like do a kind of slingshot gravitational pull move.
Classic
Getting
slingshot move. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And so he like he simulated that to make sure he got all the parameters right in the narrative. And now
Yeah.
like the narrative part of it is just standard prose narrative. So like it's not like he's giving actual calculations in the book. But he knows that theoretically there could be someone out there who could interrogate it. Or I assume that also just for his own like sense of
Yeah.
self-worth.
Well, part of it is I think
Really accurate.
the origin of that is it's self-published, and he was slowly trickling stuff out in forums and things like that. And I think that's where he got a rabid fan base. But that's the kind of like forum lurkers and forum responders. Those are the people who are going to call you out for bad science. In fact, I wrote another story about this person who was harvesting a diamond asteroid. And I made some sort of reference like, oh, this thing passed by in front of Venus and we could all see it from Earth. And this person on Hacker News was like, actually, at that distance, you wouldn't be able to see it, et cetera. So I think Andy Weir probably had folks like that in his past.
I didn't know it's self-published, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And then someone bought it and it sort of like turned his whole career around.
Hey, can I say something quickly about self-publishing that this reminded me of? But not books. Do you know a guy called Ian Hubert?
Yeah, no.
You need to look up his work. So
Okay.
he is he's like sorry, I'm not in this world, so I'm not gonna give exactly the right term, but he's like an expert in using Blender. I guess like a VFX artist, programmer, creative director person. He's just like from my perspective, again, as someone not in this world, he's just like the world's best Blender user. That's how I see him.
Mm-hmm.
Probably wrong, but that's how I characterize him. Anyway, so he's like making a Patreon funded. I don't know if it's meant to be ultimately like a series of TV shows or it's going to be a feature film or something, but he's releasing it in episodes. And it's like here's a one-man film studio using Blender to fill in everything. So he's got actors in front of green screens, but he's like making the entire world.
Wow.
And I think like he's releasing them in like 10, 15-minute chunks. The first one of these took many, many years to release. And then the second 15-minute chunk took 2 years. And he released it around a month ago. And then he just released a third one as well. Just like crazy.
Yeah.
And anyway, so he's released something like 45 minutes worth of material in, I don't know, half a decade or more. But it's just amazing. It is absolutely phenomenal. There are other people involved, but it's very clear that this is film, not just like, you know, Andy Weir's Martian's fantastic, but like that was one person writing a book. This is one person, you know, bringing together actors and other like people here and there, but generally him just imagining a world visually and producing it.
Yeah.
It's just like stunning what one person can do.
Yeah. Well, keep going.
So you got to go watch this, and
Okay.
I would say, you know, after we hang up, you got to watch his stuff. It's just absolutely amazing.
Well,
but the thing that I was going to say, let me just say one thing. The third episode is, I'm not going to give away spoilers, but it is just crazy. In the like, in the sense of crazy that's like not just impressive, but this is an unleashed creative genius doing whatever he wants in a way where no one was expecting that third episode. It is just nothing like the first two, and there's absolutely no film studio that would have let him do that.
Yeah,
but
no producer would have allowed that to happen, I'm guessing.
He's like, well, if I just do everything and I'm funded by Patreon and my Patreons are supportive, then I can just like manifest my crazy internal picture of the world. Why not?
Yeah. No,
I
it's
was just like
that
gobsmacked by how good it is.
that brings up two things. One, I think the most popular Kickstarter ever is Brandon Sanderson, who is this fantasy writer. And
Okay.
last year, he's like, hey, published tons of books, and they're amazing. And I was even thinking about reading a passage from, it's like Lord of the Rings style stuff. I was thinking about reading a passage at my wedding. That's how much I like these books. But we didn't do that. Got vetoed. Over COVID, he's like, by the way, I'm launching a Kickstarter during COVID. It's sort of like Taylor Swift, where during COVID, she released 2 albums that just dropped. He's like, I wrote 6 books over COVID. I hope you enjoyed whatever you were doing. And he self-published them all. And it's the biggest Kickstarter ever. So it's kind of incredible what's happening, what you can do if you're kind of on your own. The other thing, which I think you and I have talked about, there's this movie, Primer, this sci-fi thing. Have you seen this? It's a time travel movie.
No, you've mentioned it,
Okay, you would love it. But the whole thing was acted, directed, written, composed by, I think his name is Shane Carruth, all himself for a budget of under $5,000. And it's sort of this like singular vision of this person who can just bring something to life. And then I think probably the conduit was, I mean, this is like 15, maybe 20 years ago. So maybe it got some sort of like, what are those called? Festival pickup or something. But now I think you can probably go direct to your fans or whatever. Anyway, it's really cool. Back to this book. The thing that I'm reading in this is very similar to The Martian, although like without giving it away, instead of waking up and it's like, oh crap, I'm on Mars. How do I survive? It starts out as a tech entrepreneur, strikes it rich, who's an engineer type person, and decides to cryogenically freeze his brain, and of course gets hit by a car and almost instantly, and then wakes up, and it turns out that his mind has been uploaded to an AI that is now powering this von Neumann probe, and he's about to be sent out into space. And super cool. And it's like he has to figure out how to do all this stuff, and he has to solve all these problems, and there's all kinds of hijinks, and he's got very much the tone of the main character in The Martian, where he's like like I've got this new problem and I'm like bemused about it. How am I going to solve it? But the way that this person approaches this stuff is what I was thinking about as the engineer's mindset. Like, I've got this problem. Let me understand things from first principles. Let me poke around and do experiments. And then let me set up scripts that can automate a lot of this stuff. And where I think Martian probably did a better job of walking you through the first principles. And this person kind of like, this character just sort of like solves it quickly. And possibly that's because they're augmented by this amazing supercomputer that they can reference.
Convenient.
Yeah, it's very convenient. And they are a supercomputer, but it's really
Wait,
fun.
is this character just prompt engineering? Is that what you're saying?
Possibly. Yeah, that's true. It's like, how long has it been? It's like the answer is instantly there. They're not checking for hallucinations, but like the whole point, I was like reading this, it reminded me of another situation where I was I think it's in The Road, Cormac McCarthy's The Road, basically nuclear war. And there's a flash, and this guy who ends up being the main character gets up, sees the flash in the distance, and goes and fills his tub with water as his first move. Because I think instinctively he knows if there's some big calamity, water is going to be a scarce resource. And then I saw that and I'm like, well, I'm screwed. I never would have thought of that. And then I'm reading this book, and it's like, wow, this person has this engineer's mindset, and I love reading it, and I love trying to like adapt it, but maybe, and then I start to get self-conscious, maybe I wouldn't have the same engineer's mindset. And I'm just wondering your thoughts on this. Like, can you grow the mindset of approaching problems with this sort of like bemused interaction and like setting up systems? And how can I do a better job of being like the guy in The Martian and being like this weird AI probe space thing as it relates to like solving these problems? And maybe you don't have an easy answer, but I like reading this. I'm feeling like inspired. Like I should apply this to everything in my life, and I should make sure I'm doing this, but maybe I'm not innately built that way, or there's some other thing I can do to foster it. So I thought maybe you'd have some thoughts or answers for me.
Yeah, what an interesting question. Let's try and get clear on what is the engineering mindset. Like, can you think of a scenario where, you know, something happens, and the people with the engineering mindset take one approach, and the people without it take a totally divergent approach?
I think if I unpacked it, it's like find like trying to understand the root cause versus band-aiding a situation, and like understanding the root cause and then experimenting with ways to automate potential things that solve the root cause, which might be several layers below the actual symptom that you might have observed. And you like, maybe it's like plumbing or something, and it's like I have a plumbing leak. Engineer's mindset might be hire an expert to do this, and hope that's probably the answer in most cases. And that also could be engineer's mindset, but another engineer might be like, I need to take apart this whole system. The system might be unrelated. Maybe I find some way of adding a sensor or something that solves this. Maybe that's not a perfect example, but I think in my opinion, it's about going down the stack, understanding where it is, and maybe finding ways to prevent it from ever even getting one or two layers above where the root cause was.
Yeah. I mean, what an interesting thing to think about. So some immediate thoughts. Firstly, I would say a very small fraction of software engineers have engineers mindset. So imagine like you see something come up on the you see a bug show up in your logs, and or just like surprising behavior in your logs. I think most software engineers ignore it, and it's like, well, it's only one bug. Like, just add it to the pile. Maybe once it's affecting some percentage of users, maybe if I see it a few more times, I'll treat it as not an anomaly and maybe take it more seriously, or like wait until the first customer complaint. And that's probably a reasonable thing to do. Like, you've got so many things going on, you can't fixate on every single bug.
Yeah.
There's a small percentage of programmers who are like, at least like for a minute, that's surprising behavior. The cost of this is not high necessarily right now, but it may be indicative of something else. And so they're motivated.
They squirrel it away somewhere.
Yeah. Or they pull on it a little bit and investigate a little bit and see that, okay, this is like a anomalous data, and it's indicative of a bigger problem we had previously. And I expect to see that if I look in this place, there's another manifestation that's much more costly. And this was like the canary in the coal mine, or this was the small clue that we got of something bigger. That to me is a rare breed.
Yeah.
And I kind of instinctively use the word breed there. I actually don't know how much this is developed as a mentality, and how much of it is like a proclivity that some people have. Like, there are definitely some people who go deeper and deeper and deeper on something that they just can't get out. They just have as a kind of brainworm.
Yeah.
And I think the medical community these days has like a term for that. And so I'm not sure like how much of that, like, because it's a not a productive way of being in a lot of contexts and for a lot of organizations. And I can think of particular people who I won't embarrass, who their fault and their asset are the same thing, which is that they get fixated on these things and go deeper and deeper and deeper until they understand it. So it's a kind of, in some contexts, anti-engineering mindset, because the engineer is supposed to produce something in the end, particularly when you think of like a traditional engineer who has a client or something and needs to serve the client ultimately. These people are not like that, but there's a fixation on how things work. And
I feel some sort of voyeuristic attraction to these people, and maybe it's because I'm not that way myself, or I've like play acted at it in some way, but like I enjoy reading stories from their perspective, or watching movies and pretending that I could be like that. And I want to be able to pull some of that towards me, even if maybe I'm not that breed right away.
Yeah, I think there's a mild version of that, and that's actually where I sit. Like, I'm like you, and I'm sure we've spoken about this before. Like, I look at particularly security researchers with a huge amount of admiration, where I'm like, how did you know to even commit 1,000 hours of your time to the minutia of this? Like, reading the Intel manual to figure out the details of this. How did you do that? Just turn to page 1 and start reading. That's not a normal human thing to do. And then many of them at the end find the answer. It's crazy. You're reverse engineering this thing. You're trying to like jailbreak this device that just went on the market. No one has any other information about. But I'm not really like that. What I am, I think, is a kind of middle ground where if I see a bug, I am excited about it.
Yeah.
And so I think most people, when they talk about debugging, are treated as a kind of unfortunate act of programming. To me, that's a lot of the joy of programming. It's like the bug is a gift. The bug, I mean, we're trying to eliminate them, but each one is a gift to us,
Yeah.
where we have now an opportunity to do some problem solving, to understand the system better, to see like why this thing broke in an unexpected way. We have an opportunity to learn, and also just it's fun to try and get to the bottom of it. And I think there's definitely something that can be cultivated there, because I've seen people change their attitude towards these things. I think, going back to our previous conversations about flows,
Yeah.
sometimes I see a kind of trauma where people have been exposed to too challenging of a problem in a context where they maybe had a lot of like feelings of self-worth on the line, and it didn't work out. Like they couldn't fix the bug. Someone else showed up, and like, I mean, maybe I'm guilty of this as well. Like I sit down with someone who's been debugging something for a while, and they're beating themselves up about not being able to fix it. And I don't even know why, but I have a hypothesis that turns out to be right.
This is the
It's
like
probably
SNL tech guy who's like, move, and then you just do it for them.
I heard a story like that. I know you've got somewhere to go soon, so I won't tell the story. But yeah, I hear that kind of step away from the keyboard kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't mean that. It's just like not being sensitive to the fact that this person is having an experience of debugging where if they don't realize that you've built up a skill over a decade or more, maybe like in terms of the broader engineering mindset, you started when you were 5, pulling apart your toaster or whatever and trying to figure out how it works.
Yeah.
Maybe you've had 3 decades of experience of trying to understand things, and they don't realize that it's a long process, and the fact that they don't get it on the first try ends up being like a feeling of, well, debugging is bad. It's a bad experience for me, and I shouldn't try and do it. I should avoid situations there. Whereas if you have like small wins when you're earlier or younger, like as a kid, where you do start to figure things out, and that's a positive feedback loop, and you enjoy that, I think that kind of snowballs, where you're like, lay it on me, give me the hardest bug you got.
Yeah.
And actually, Felix, I think, I mean, it'd be interesting to talk to Felix about this, and Omar about this, because they're both people who've kind of run to danger in their to the extent that software engineers really have danger and can run. But like in their companies, remember, they're both saying like the key to their success, without even knowing one another, they're like, oh, the key to my success was that whenever there was a problem, I put my hand up.
Totally.
Yeah, it's like I think that they must have had a process of getting to that point where they have put their hand up maybe for smaller things, and it's gone well enough that they've had a positive feedback loop. And I'm sure there's a lot of individual variation and other psychological factors and so on. But this is my best guess, that some people have like, that we all have a kind of curiosity, like maybe, again, individual variation, but I think we're born curious, at least for my kids and other kids that I've seen. There is this curiosity. Everyone talks about kids asking why for years. And for some, they end up on a more positive feedback loop of that. And for some, it's more negative.
Yeah.
And the people who are very like drawn towards understanding and thinking through things, and like a disaster happens and they're curious about what's going on. It's like, well, I can't change the fact that the earthquake happened. Now let me just think, like, how does this affect me? How, what should I do? How should I think about this? There's no point kind of wallowing. I think that is a kind of, I feel like, the growth and fixed mindset framing doesn't quite capture this, but there is a kind of self-defeating fixed mindset aspect that the engineering mindset needs to abandon, and just like.
Yeah. And I agree with that, approaching those problems. And I think the fictionalized version of this that I'm drawn to is the like burn the boats. And if I'm marooned on Mars, or I wake up in an AI space probe thing, I don't have another choice. So I have to do this. And I think sometimes in the work context, I do have another choice. It's ignore it and let someone else deal with it, or focus on something else. But yeah, I think I should think about how much fun these people are having and run towards those problems. The you know that maybe we've talked about this, the meme of the little dog, this is fine, in the burning building and everything.
Yeah.
I think I'm not sure your interpretation of that, but I remember seeing that and I thinking like, that's ironic. The dog is not fine. The house is burning down. And then the switch is, no, the dog is fine. The house is burning down, but they understand, like, let me just relax here, sip my coffee. I know how I'm going to put this out. Don't worry. And that shift, when I realized the true meaning of the meme, that was a major breakthrough for me.
Is that the true meaning of the
I mean,
meme?
that's a true meaning. I mean, it's a true meaning for me that the
You
dog
get a
is
very
fine.
positive mindset about that meme.
Yeah, I'd prefer that to like sardonic irony all the time. So yeah, I like being positive about that dog.
Yeah, I mean it's not about denial, right? Like I said, we don't want the bugs, but the bugs are still a gift. Like if you didn't have the bugs, you wouldn't have those prompts, those opportunities to apply your craft. And it's like you talk about or you hear about like surgeons, let's say.
Yeah.
Why are surgeons drawn to challenging cases? Like they don't want their patients to be suffering. They don't want them to be suffering in like unpredictable, novel ways in particular. That's going to like reduce their odds of success. They would prefer their patients to have like predictable, easy cases, but they're drawn to the challenging cases. They see that those as gifts where they get to apply what they've worked on, their craft,
Mhm.
their skill set, their profession, push their abilities, learn a little bit more. And yeah, it's still like I don't have a good answer for how much of this is innate, developed, and what are the like key factors to development, but fascinated by it because also I have kids,
Yeah.
and if there's something that I can do to facilitate this positivity towards challenge, I think this is the broader thing, even outside of the context of engineering and technology and whatever. This positivity towards challenge, I think that's going to be.
Yeah, you should just be me too, like chaos monkeying their toys, like purposely breaking them and seeing if they could figure it out.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I
I
had one
do.
other
Like,
I
sorry,
was
go
just say I
ahead.
had one other quick thing I wanted to talk about before we run, which was I experienced like joy and excitement about a like side project this week. And we were talking about like, oh, with the writing stuff, like find the thing that makes you happy. It wasn't about writing, but it was great. And I had this idea and I was like woke up in the morning and was working on it and then did a little bit at night. And the next day I made it better. And it just felt really good. And it like I can describe the project if you want, but man, I haven't felt that way in a long time. And part of me is like, as I'm doing it, it's like, this is just, that the problem of snacking on easy things, like it wasn't that complicated or hard, but I made like, and I was, part of my brain was like, you're snacking. This isn't your real work. Your real work is like X, Y, and Z or writing the book or whatever. You shouldn't be doing this. And on this side, I was like, yeah, but this is really fun. And I feel like I'm doing something and I'm like, I'm learning and I'm making, and
Fantastic.
I went to this side and that was really nice.
That's so good. Yeah, you just got
Yeah.
to do that. I think. Yeah, there's an XKCD cartoon about that where like someone gets yanked out of reality and this like spirit or whatever is telling them the secret, and the secret is to like do the side quests.
Do the
Basically,
side
it's
quests.
it's like you have this model in your mind that either you do like you're productive in the conventional and
Mm,
standard and like prescribed way, or you're a slacker when actually there's all this interesting stuff going on around you, and it's reasonable to just like walk sideways
yeah.
and go and pursue that thing. And I think that so much success that I've seen in people at the kind of exceptional level is from them pulling on that thread, not ignoring that
Okay.
voice. So that's
Okay,
cool, man.
good.
I'm
Good.
very excited that you had a
I,
positive
I,
experience there.
I felt some feelings. It was great.
Are you going to keep going with it?
It's kind of done. Basically, I can describe it very quickly. Everyone's playing with different social media protocols. There's one called Farcaster that has this like
Mhm.
completely permissionless way of um, not signing up right now, but accessing the data. And I've been playing around with this, and it's been fun. And there are a bunch of people who've built easy ways to like add APIs onto it. And you've seen the Carmack .plan files.
Yep.
Have you seen this? Yeah, where he wrote this daily log of this stuff. Well, most of the use cases of the social media protocol right now are like Twitter clones. And I was thinking there could be a way if you constrain this and write one message a day that has this particular symbol at the top, and you adhere to this kind of like pattern, like sub constraint on the protocol, you could replicate daily logs and store them on the protocol. And like you can make like a little crappy UI, which I did, which pulls those. And now I have my like Carmack style .plan files where I still just use these other apps to post stuff, but now I can view, like render it myself, and I don't have to store it. So it's just like a little thing. I think it's done. It's definitely one of those things where I could keep polishing it and whatnot, but I put it out there. A few people tried it. People might not try it anymore. Who cares? It felt really good.
Nice. Yeah, maybe
nice.
you'll find it. Maybe you'll find it like a seemingly unrelated project where you'll realize that
yes,
whatever you learn from this actually comes into it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I got to run, but I'll see you next week.
Good to chat, Charlie.
Okay, thanks, Oz.
Take care, man.